The Game Awards have come out and finally given out their nominations for all of the awards throughout the year, and one of the most coveted on their 10th year of the Game Awards is Game of the Year. However, there has been a lot of controversy with this year's Game of the Year awards because you'll notice of the 6 slots, 2 of those slots have gone towards a DLC, being Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And the giant discussion that's happening right now is in a year that is quite frankly one of the I feel like it's a really fantastic gaming year personally, and we can see that here with the nominations. So we have Astrobot. This is a small platformer made by around 20 to 30 people from Sony, which is absolutely incredible. I loved every second of it. In fact, there's so many clips of me seeing like certain parts that I don't want to spoil playing on stream, but absolutely insane. Astrobot is incredible, and I've personally never played a game that is a love letter to a brand the way Astrobot is to Sony. If you played the packing game that came with the PlayStation 5, like it's great, but Astrobot is insane. Some of the things they do with certain franchises, absolutely insane, especially the first levels surprise. Literally blew my mind. And coming in as a debut game, we have Balatro, which is like at its core a super addictive, amazing video game with its own really fun aesthetic, amazing music. It just gets you in the vibe. Balatro to me is an incredible game, and already to have a platformer and effectively a deck building game with poker aesthetics be in the top 2 Game of the Year nominations is an incredible start. Right after that, we have a debut game from Game Science coming out from China with Black Myth Wukong, which is like, I haven't played it in fairness, but I've seen a lot of people play it, and chat seems to really be into it, pretty much blackmailing me to choose Black Myth Wukong. Aside from that, skipping over the 2 that are causing a little bit of controversy, we have Metaphor ReFantazio, which if you know the Persona series, then is effectively that in a different aesthetic. I haven't played it as well, but I know a lot of people really love it. But again, I really want to emphasize here, we have a platformer, a deck building game, a first-time AAA China-infused game, Dark Souls aesthetic. We have Metaphor, an RPG. Like, this is an incredible amount of variety. The question that's really starting to hit people is, does it make sense to put a remake, and doesn't it make sense to put DLC inside Game of the Year? So chat, you let me know what you think in the chat below. But before I touch on it, I think it's interesting to see what the Game of the Year awards have been so far. The nominees for 2014, we have no remakes whatsoever, no DLC. Dragon Age Inquisition takes the win. Bayonetta 2, Dark Souls 2, Hearthstone, Middle-earth. 2015, no DLC, no remakes. Witcher 3. 2016, same thing. Overwatch takes the win. 2017, Breath of the Wild, no remakes, no DLC. 2018 is God of War, no remakes, no DLC. 2019, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice ends up winning. My votes would be between Death Stranding and Resident Evil 2. And this is where I think we can start to get in a really interesting discussion on what makes sense for a Game of the Year, because this would be the first time a remake has been put into Game of the Year, and I think remakes make a ton of sense. But before we get onto that, let me jump into 2020, which again, now we're getting more remakes, right? So another year with a remake. Last of Us Part 2 is 2020's winner. 2021, It Takes Two, no remakes in this year. And then 2022, we have the acclaimed Elden Ring, which did win in 2022 with, again, no remakes for that year. Now, last year, we had Baldur's Gate 3 winning 2023's Game of the Year with another remake, a Resident Evil 4 remake, which feels... This one's tricky because I think Resident Evil 4 really holds up. In the case of Resident Evil 2, I don't think Resident Evil 2, A, is easily accessible, and B, holds up as well. The controls are not the same as the third-person controls we have now, and quite frankly, the graphics that they did for Resident Evil 2 is absolutely insane. Obviously, Resident Evil 4 as well, but just the controls, it felt incredible. I never played Resident Evil 2, so going to Resident Evil 2 Remake was an incredible moment for me. I couldn't believe how great that game was. It really opened my eyes to the idea of having a remake in Game of the Year. And quite frankly, I don't think the gaming industry really found a lot of problems with having a remake inside as a nomination. Because effectively a remake, you are rebuilding the entire game and making new creative liberties to try to change the experience for a more modern audience. So it's not effectively the same type of game, while it is somewhat. And I don't think anyone really, at least I didn't really hear any issues with Resident Evil 4 or effectively Resident Evil 2. I mean, Resident Evil 2 Remake is an incredible game. Resident Evil 3 Remake wasn't even nominated. So you can see, like, these games do have to meet a certain bar. Now, in 2024, as I've said, we have not only a remake again, which I think is fine personally, but we also have a DLC with Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, which leaves to question, what is the purpose of this category being Game of the Year? Should it be anything that's playable? Should it be from any year? Can it be an expansion? Does it just have to be what is the most fun thing of the year? Or does it have to be a game? Specifically, you pop in the disc, you buy the game, and you can play right away. Because in that case, Elden Ring doesn't make sense. And I think the reason a lot of people are having a lot of controversy over this, if we go to the Game Awards, Twitter, I mean, we can just see here the nominees for Game of the Year. Let me zoomify this. The nominees for Game of the Year at the Game Awards on Twitter here on December 12th. He goes and posts this. I mean, we can see right here. So I forget, can you play Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree without owning Elden Ring? And then people are starting to meme on this logic, saying, like, why don't you just vote anything? So you could vote Solitaire, no Silent Hill 2, no Helldivers 2, no Space Marine 2, no Tekken 8, but you put a DLC on there. And I think this is where a lot of the problems are coming from. I mean, this guy says right here, nominating DLC is such a disgrace. It's called Game of the Year. And this is where we're starting to run into a lot of issues, because the thing that not a lot of people know about the Game Awards is that the Game Awards are actually voted and decided upon by a panel. So 90% of all the votes for a category in the Game Awards actually comes from these panelists. So we have IGN, Inverse, I've never heard of, the Jeff Gerstmann Show. So those of you who are familiar with Giant Bomb back in the day, I mean, I know it's still going, but it's not really the same. You know Jeff Gerstmann, he was from GameSpot. I actually think Jeff makes a ton of sense for an industry panel. Kind of Funny, LA Times, MinMax, PC Gamer, Polygon, What's Good Games, Touch Arcade, The Verge, VentureBeat, Game Rant, NPR, Pride.com, Variety. And so 90% of the vote for the weight of what wins in this category actually comes from these guys voting these, whereas 10% comes from players such as you and me being able to influence the vote somewhat. And so effectively what you have in this case is the reason that Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree, and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth are put inside these nominations is effectively because of this panel right here, the members of this board effectively voting them in. And so a lot of people had a lot of fun with Shadow of the Erdtree. I mean, it was a huge event. Then when it came out, I think the world kind of stopped. You know, Kai Cenat had his stream. It was a huge thing. Everybody loved Shadow of the Erdtree. No one's taking anything away from that. But it has gotten a lot of people questioning, does this make sense to have a panel that is really not indicative of what the game industry, the players themselves are feeling? And as we can see on this thread here, try to find it. Where did I put it here? Not this. Yeah, so again, people are not happy DLC nominating. We got a clown meme here, rigged already DLC for Game of the Year. A lot of people are starting to assume that effectively the rules have been changed, which effectively they were changed for DLC so that Elden Ring can win once again, which as we've shown here in 2022, Elden Ring did win as its own nomination as a game, whereas Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree is very much a DLC. You cannot play Shadow of the Erdtree unless you beat a certain section of Elden Ring. You cannot just simply buy Erdtree and then play it. And I think the reason a lot of people are upset is if we look at the best games from this year, we can start to see there's a lot of great stuff this year. So here, looking on Metacritic, we can see the top games of 2024. And I mean, chat, feel free to tell me which ones you're really liking this year, because I think there's a huge variety. And I think that's why this year is such a really credible year, to be honest, at least for me personally, because of course we have the DLC here, which is being rated very, very high. But we also have Astrobot and a fantastic platformer. We have Metaphor Refantasio. You know, these types of games are very long, but I think people who like these games, like, you can see all the love and attention that the Persona devs go and put in this stuff, and it looks incredible. Square Enix came with a part 2 to their Final Fantasy remake, Final Fantasy VII remake, and it looks incredible. So we have an incredible, like, anime-infused RPG. We have an Elden Ring DLC. We have Astrobot 3D platformer. We have Final Fantasy remake. UFO 50, which is a collection of 50 single and multiplayer games. I was looking at this the other day, and I was actually pleasantly impressed with UFO 50. In fact, I added it to my Steam cart. I want to play that tomorrow on stream. Animal Wells, another game we played on stream, his first indie game, 30 megabytes for this whole thing. Satisfactory, which I think has been in and out of early access, so maybe that doesn't necessarily count. But Balatro has been insane. Yeah, I'm not counting the remaster for Last of Us Part 2. No, thank you. Thank goodness. I don't know what this is. Tekken 8, Kill Knight, which Kill Knight looks sick. I added that on Steam as well. Absolutely insane. Destiny 2, The Final Shape came out. Curiously not nominated either, but again, I don't think it's as coveted as something as Shadow of the Erd Tree. Another remaster for Horizon. Like a Dragon came out. There's a couple other things here. Warhammer... Maybe I put it here. Oh, yeah. So Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2 was highly beloved. Of course, we have things like Helldivers 2 was heavily beloved, came out in February. We have things like Pal World, highly praised, heavily beloved. I mean, a lot of playtime, right? Like everyone was playing both these things, right? So the question comes back. Do DLCs and remakes make sense for Game of the Year? The frustration is there's a lot of really interesting stuff available this year, and quite frankly, it seems like a disservice to the gaming industry that a traditional game, hence Game of the Year, isn't voted. So right now, I think, what is the point of something like Game of the Year? I think that's the most important thing to think of. What is the point of something like that? What is the point of Best Picture? What is the point of Best TV Show? What is the point of Best Game? And I think the idea is for the person who just looks at a sea of games and says, I don't know what to get. This one has the award. This is the one I buy. And so I can play that. So it's good for those types of people, right? It is a helpful indicator to help those types of people buy games. On top of that, you have just accolades for the developers. And then on top of that, you have people who are fans of the industry to be able to say like, hey, my game got nominated. I like this game, right? They want to champion their game. So you have those three things. But the first one is the thing that actually leads to sales. Personally, for me, I think DLC makes no sense. It comes down to just the fact that you just can't play it. Like Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree just cannot be played from the get-go. Like if I buy Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree, it just doesn't work. I have to buy Elden Ring and Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree for it to work. So it's not its own standalone package. So to me, I would actually change the rules to say that it needs to be a standalone package, because at the end of the day, that's who it's trying to help. I just think it makes way more sense to add a new category. I mean, we've gone through a few of these categories here. If we just go look at the categories for a second, we can see we have silly categories that to me personally make no sense. Best esports athlete. Why? Who's that helping? Best esports game. Why? Who's that helping? I think you change that to best competitive game, because I think there are people who want competitive games that look at these awards that go, okay, I need a new competitive game. Which one do I pick? This helps someone. Best esports game doesn't really help someone. There's a couple others here that make absolutely no sense. Innovation and accessibility. While admirable, I think it actually makes no sense to have an award for that. Like, what was the point of it? Who's it helping? It's just a panel of people right here. It's just these guys saying these are the most accessible games. Doesn't make the game better necessarily. They may not know anyone who actually helps people with that accessibility. They may not be suffering from something that needs that accessibility anyways, and yet they get to vote for it with 90% of the weight. It doesn't make much sense for me. I just see no reason why you need an award for this. Same thing with Games for Impact. It just seems like something that like this crowd here wants to be able to put their foot down in the industry and make a mark. And I just think that it's a little elitist, and I just don't think it's necessary. Like, what's the point? It's not. I don't see what it's helping, other than just like, you know, a fake little hug that everyone gets to have, and like a little firm handshake. It's like we did something, but it's like according to these guys, not really the world. The world will see your impact through sales. So I don't think that's really necessary. Whereas like something whereas best game of the year can help increase sales. I don't think Games for Impact, innovation, accessibility is going to increase sales. I don't think anyone, like it seems backwards, right? No one's going to the awards and being like, what's the best in accessibility so I can find a good game? No, they're going, what's the best game? And then which one has the best accessibility for my needs? And I would argue that like only 1% actually do that, if any. So that's the real problem with it. So when we go to Game of the Year, we can immediately see that that DLC can be replaced with a new category that is best expansion, right? And we've had a few expansions this year. If we go to best ongoing, there was best ongoing. Let me find it here. Ongoing. So Diablo 4, Destiny 2, Final Fantasy, you know, we have stuff where expansions make sense, and I really think that you could put yourself to have Elden Ring in here where expansions or DLC make sense. Because if I own a bunch of games and I look for an award that says best DLC, then I'm more inclined to go get that DLC. Dude, I had a fantastic time with Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, but this one's saying that like the Destiny 2 Final Shape is better than that. Hypothetically, if that won. Or the Diablo 4 expansion is better than that. I own Diablo 4, or I have it on Game Pass. Let me get that DLC. That's what the awards benefits are. It's to help sales. The gaming industry wants to live in this real weird world. And when I say gaming industry, I mean journalists. They want to live in this weird world where they control all the narrative for how games have impact of everybody else and what they do and how people should see them and how should they be perceived. When in reality, all awards are supposed to be is to help sales. That's it. That's the point of an award. And whether your choice wins or not is just a bonus. And so here with all the games that we had this year with the insane amount of variety, I think it's very depressing that Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, as good as it may or may not be, with all intents and purposes, if we look here, it is the top reviewed game of the year, or game experience. It just feels strange to call it a game considering you can't just play it right away. But it is rocking here with a 94, tied with Astrobot and Metaphor ReFantazio. Personally, for me, I would have preferred having something like Helldivers 2, which did something entirely new this year that we haven't seen, that maybe players haven't had a chance to jump into. Or, I personally liked Warhammer 40K. I would probably say Helldivers 2 leans more, but Warhammer 40K, I think the nice thing about that is we really get a time, like Warhammer 40K is Warhammer 40K is like a Gen 6 game in Gen 9 packaging. It is a campaign. It is a multiplayer. It is co-op. Like, it has everything. It is free customization. I loved everything about Warhammer 40K, and it was like a reminder of what games used to be, not these product-led pieces of like, hey, buy this, buy that, and get this, I don't really like that. So that's where I would land. I'm okay with the remakes, personally, because again, seeing something like Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2 is just not a great gameplay experience to go back on due to the way the camera controls have changed. So I think it makes a ton of sense to have remakes, to take that thing and bring it to the next generation. It doesn't necessarily mean it's at an advantage, because effectively all the lessons that original game have given the world for other game developers to copy have effectively been learned for over 20 years and can be beaten. But having Resident Evil 2 be nominated, or even Final Fantasy VII Rebirth be nominated for Game of the Year as a remake, tells us something really interesting that I don't think Shadow of the Erdtree tells. Each of these games tell a unique story, except for Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. So like Astrobot tells us there is a place for incredible 3D platformers. Balatro tells us there is a place where you can just focus on core gameplay mechanics and make an incredible game that can be Game of the Year and go toe-to-toe with AAA developers. Black Myth Wukong tells us there is a place to have a China-infused AAA game coming from this is their first game, Game Science's first game. And they had their own unique, innovative take on the Souls type of gameplay. And people seem to really love it. Again, the chat seems to really be behind Black Myth Wukong. So far as blackmailing the old Goose. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I think the story this tells is those old games that you played back in the day that were fun to you, and maybe people have told you that it's only fun because of nostalgia. Maybe those games are just really good, and they just need like certain mechanics just updated to bring it back to the modern world. But underlying the core gameplay of those games is actually timeless, right? Resident Evil 2 worked. Resident Evil 4 worked. Final Fantasy VII seems to still work. Certain things I don't think work. Like GoldenEye. I just don't think that works. The analog 3D is coming out. We got one, and I just don't think that's going to play as well whenever we get to play that on there. So I don't think that works. Whereas Metaphor ReFantazio, again, it's a hardcore RPG with anime infusion, and it's just like it's 100 hours. Same thing with Final Fantasy VII. It just shows they have a place. They tell a story. Whereas Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree is an incredible game that I just, like, what does it say about the industry? I think there's way more interesting things to be said by putting in a Helldivers, by putting in a Warhammer 40K Space Marine. To me, that's more interesting. And I think if you let the players vote on what the top 6 games of the year are, I don't think you're getting all of these games. But that's just speculation. I mean, I can't prove that at all. So all that being said, I think this makes no sense personally. I just think this doesn't fit with this game of the year. I think it needs an entirely new category. I think if we're thinking about game of the year, we're thinking about something that is trying to create sales for people to buy. It is an award to help people make decisions on sales. And on that front, I just don't think Shadow of the Erdtree makes sense. But I think Best Expansion makes sense because Elden Ring's already won game of the year with Best Expansion 2 years later. This tells a story that makes more sense from a consumer who wants to buy things. Personally, if I had to pick to replace this, I'd probably go Helldivers 2. They've done a lot of really new, interesting stuff, and they showed that you can just have a live service game that is just fun with the boys. Like, that's all it is. I think if they make a Helldivers 3 with a single-player campaign that is just, like, exactly the type of pitch that they pitched us with Helldivers 2, yo, that will be unstoppable. And I'm not saying Helldivers 2 is better than Shadow of the Erdtree. I'm just saying this doesn't fit in Game of the Year. Now, that being said, which game do I think is the game of the year? Which one will I be nominating? Chat! It's time to vote on the game of the year. It is time. Once again, the nominees are Astrobot, Balatro, Black Myth Wukong, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Metaphor Refantazio. Astrobot 3D platform, I have played it. Balatro card game, I have played it. Black Myth Wukong, I have not. I have watched a bunch of people play it. Not the same. Elden Ring, same. I've only played these two. 100-hour games are really hard for me to justify. Very hard. Chat is overwhelmingly voting for Wukong. Wukong. Black Myth Wukong. I haven't played it. My personal vote is not Wukong. Mostly because I haven't played it. But even if I had, I don't think I'm using that. I don't know. My favorite game of the year was going to be Astrobot because of the love, just the graphical fidelity, the return to 3D platforming that just like cared about just fun times. However, the problem with Astrobot is the gameplay, the combat is so pathetically easy. I think they did themselves a huge disservice. When you play a 3D Mario game, the enemies you fight with your movement system, it's varied in such a way that keeps it challenging. Mario Odyssey, Mario 64, Mario Sunshine are more challenging games than Astrobot. Astrobot is fan service in a beautiful 3D platformer with incredible set design, incredible music, with horrible non-challenging combat, except for a few levels. And so if I had to give my game of the year for a game that just kept my brain going constantly, I think I have to go Balatro, which is surprising. Because Astrobot literally, I was getting to all the final worlds, and I had a smile on my face every time, but I just kept finding myself bored as I got further and further. I loved every second of Astrobot. The challenge was so weak, so not fun. It was boring. There was a couple enemy encounters that were fun, but not enough. So chat, my 2024 Game of the Year nomination is Balatro. Balatro has won my Game of the Year. In fact, I'm going to tweet about it right now. My vote. There it is. Balatro. Chat. What a freaking year. Let's go. Chat. I think regardless of the controversy, we can all agree this was a heck of a year. I dramatically think this was like the best year in years. Astrobot was incredible. Balatro incredible. Everybody loves Black Myth Wukong. Chat is literally blackmailing me to choose it. People loved Erdtree. Erdtree was a freaking phenomenon. Helldivers 2 was a phenomenon. Pal World literally woke up Nintendo to make proper Pokemon games. Probably just taught them to sue them. Final Fantasy VII taught us that, like, dude, a 20-year-old game still works. It still works. You don't need all this stupid modern stuff that people say you need. It could just be a good game. And all these are good games. There's like no microtransactions in any one of these to my knowledge. Maybe Final Fantasy. But like, dude, this is what I'm talking about. I love it. Quite frankly, all these games, regardless of the controversy, I think this shows that like there's a lot of great stuff coming in games. A lot of great developers, a lot of great ideas. The fact that there's a poker card game that won my game of the year of these nominees, man, if Warhammer Space Marine 2 and Helldivers 2 were here, maybe. Because I really had a great time with those games. Absolutely insane. Shout out to Local Thunk Playstack for winning my nomination. I can't wait to watch the Game Awards live. And just as a reminder, we're going to be streaming the Game Awards live on Twitch TV/zenkaigoose. So be there, be square, and I'll be wearing a suit and tie. We'll have the Canada Dry in our wine glass as we do, okay, as us Canadians do. And I'm very excited. I'm very excited to do that. I think it's going to be an incredible moment. We did it for the Xbox Live Showcase or Xbox Showcase 2024, whatever it was called. It was fun. Let's actually check. That's a good question. When is the stream? December 12th. Holy! December 12th. Absolutely insane. We'll be there.